Welcome, my name is Steve. Hey, show of hands, how many of you ever picked up a car and then immediately removed the Evap tank or disconnected it? Yeah, me too. Well, stick around and find out why I'm putting that back on. Here's where things go before I take this puppy apart. Evap tank, tubing underneath there. There's that tubing under there, hard to see because it's dark. And you got these guys up here. This here solenoid, which has these three vinyl tubes coming off of it, screwed right there with that one screw hole on this one screw.
Okay, these are what the Evap tank screws look like. There's 4 of them. Gonna get those plated.
So it cleaned up nice in the sandblasting. I didn't want to just paint over the original black, because that would clearly peel. And that's probably good enough.
The Evap valve was in the trunk at the time that was hit with the bed liner, so there's a lot of overspray on it. The one from a 72, 73, 74 RX3 is black. This one's, white plastic. I'm just going to paint it black so that it doesn't look like such an eyesore. At first, I thought to myself, oh shit, how does this thing go back together? But, I didn't film how it came apart, but it kind of becomes clear when I take a look at it. This little pin here, it's got a conical shape. Must accept this conical piece. Okay, so that's going to balance the spring. So the condense tank was not on my 74. I had torn it off when I put on headers and, fucked around with the emissions. I was a teenager and bastardized my car. It was all in the name of performance. So what I'm working with here is the stock 76 Evap valve, or condense valve, check valve. Takes an 8 mil. Okay, I've got the Evap valve put back together, but does it work? I've got the manual out now, and I can see that they're calling it a check and cut valve. I'm going to want to connect a pressure gauge to the condense side, and unfortunately this picture here has, the picture's backwards, because the condense side is actually right here where he's got the finger. And the reason I know this is because on my valve, if I can get this in just the right, see the C right there, and the F right here by my thumb. So that represents, the fuel side is the highest portion of the valve. According to this picture, the condense side is the highest portion of the valve. So, they've got the directions here that say connect a pressure gauge to the passage to the condense tank and blind the other end by finger. So in order to do that, I need to do what my valve says printed on it, fuel versus condense, not what the picture says. You know, because first I was looking at the picture going, oh, I'm supposed to blow through this side and hold this side, and it wasn't working. And I'm like, shit, my valve doesn't work. But it just turns out the picture's wrong. Now, I don't have a pressure gauge, but I am able to demonstrate that it works. So now that I have the evap valve, or check and cut valve, as the manual calls it, now I've got it back together. I want to check it, make sure that it opens up and everything. There's a little spring and a diaphragm, and I got to make sure all that stuff's working. I don't have a pressure gauge, so the manual gives you a specific pressure that things are supposed to open. Don't have that. I do want to know, does it open? So what I'm going to do is blow through the condense port, and then a valve should open. I'm also going to block the fuel port while I blow through the condense port. So let's check and see if that aspect of this valve works. So yeah, it does take some effort. Yeah, that works. The second test is to blow through the atmosphere port, and then a valve should open and bleed to both sides, actually, both to the fuel and the condensed side. And it does. It's working. Okay, great. Now that I know the diaphragm is opening, I'm ready to put this back on the car. So here's the completed valve I'm going to put back on the car. And I've got the extra one here. Notice the difference. One's plastic and just attaches to a plate. The other one it's also plastic, but it has a metal cap, and that metal cap, by way of a flange, attaches to the same plate. What I'm going to do is put the old school one back together and just have it as a spare. Oh, also, let me add that at the base is a fibrous, kind of a felt padding, and I'm sure it's covered with activated charcoal, and that is what helps it seal. One thing to note is the direction. One of the directions is you can blow air through, and it'll come out this piece here. The other direction, air won't blow through. So you want to put it in the right direction. And in my case, okay, so that's the direction that points towards the front of the car after it's bolted to the condensed tank. So this nipple here going towards the front of the car is the one I want to be the blow through. So let's find that on this one here. Okay, so this is the one that goes to the front of the car. So if this is connected like that, I want this nipple going off to my right. Got my freshly plated screws and nuts. Go back on. The spare will just hang out in my parts bin. So I've got some brand new hose, some Gates hose, and we're going to go ahead and cut some tubing to replace all these little tubes that plug into the condense tank. So this is the little piece that comes out and goes to the top of the fuel tank. So let's cut that little guy out. Okay, let's put him on. Takes this kind of hose clamp. I want this screw part of the hose clamp to be where I can reach it, so let's take a look here. Once it's connected to the fuel tank, it's gonna be tough. Next, we'll do this guy here. These hoses fit snug enough to probably get away without a clamp. They're really not going anywhere. This guy goes at the bottom and leads off towards a spout just like it at the top of the fuel tank. As evaporated fuel comes into the tank and recondenses back into liquid, it will come out of this tank and back into the top of your fuel tank. And that is what I'm talking about, recapturing the fuel that I've paid for. You wouldn't just stand with a stack of money in your hand and let the breeze blow it away. Hell no. All right, let's talk about orientation here. This would be right side of the car. That's going to be left side of the car. So in my case, driver's side, it's pointing that way. Trying to sort out where to put this hose clamp. So right now I've got it upside down and pointing towards the driver or the passenger compartment. That's backwards. We want it this way so I can reach it from the trunk or boot. So that's going to go under there like that. I'm going to flip it all back upside down again, and it'll go this way. There's two more to go here. That's the ones that connect to this check valve, and those are longer tubes. Let's see what we've got on that video prior to disassembly. There's this tube that says vent for front floor entry. I'm going to cut that piece now. It's that long, and what it means by front floor entry, it's that tube right there closest to it, or the one on our left. So that's where that connects. And let's cut that piece now. And that'll connect the system to the charcoal canister in the engine bay on a Mazda RX3. That's inside the air cleaner assembly. Gonna be a little different on my car. We'll talk more about that later. This guy goes down to, I believe the floorboard goes here and then goes down to the bottom of the boot. I do like to understand why things work the way they work, but the factory manual didn't quite explain what I was looking for. So turning to a Haynes manual, I was able to find a little better diagram of what's going on in there and why. So we can just zoom in on this here, and you can kind of freeze frame it if you want to read what's going on there. So this bottom hose that comes out the bottom of the check valve just goes off to the atmosphere, and I was wondering why that is. And it's because like on a hot day when things are evaporating and the tank is pretty much expanding, it needs to be able to push the air out all while capturing the fuel in the condensed tank. So it does have a port to atmosphere. The other port that goes to the charcoal canister on these Mazda RX3s, that is inside the air filter, which I don't tend to use that, but I do have a little check valve which will send fumes back to my condensed tank. So we'll see that, months from now when I put an air filter on this thing. Okay, the last piece we need, I got three of them because, one's green car, one's hazel, one's from Tony. What it is it goes here and then slips on down through that little hole at the bottom of the trunk. And what it is it allows vent. It has this little nipple on the end so that it fits in that hole I just showed you. I'm probably going to need this nipple. Am I able to take that out without breaking it? There we go. That was easy. Right, if you're like me, you pulled all this stuff off your car because it was related to smog, right? And fuck smog. But once you learn what this stuff actually does, then I realize I want that back. Okay, one more piece here to cut, and we will use some co-line that I've got here, 7.5 millimeter. Yeah, let's get one of these Guys on. As far as trimming it goes, it's going to be about 1 meter. I'm just not going to trim it until I've got this in the car. Just going to wrap this up a little bit neat, put the condensed tank back in the car, and then I'll trim this last piece that goes to the filler neck. I have the original hardware. I replated the U-nuts and the original screws. So it's possible that I might need to pull this out in order to get these bottom hoses connected to the fuel tank. But I'm going to get it put in place here. Let's get it where it goes. Just want to note that this little section of the rear deck is raised to allow for that vapor tube. Give it some space. And that comes back around to the check valve. Remember this guy here with the little plastic tip? And he goes in that hole there. For real. And this other guy here, he's gonna go there. But I'll catch that from the other side. And then this guy, we are ready to trim to this length right here. Next, there is just one more tube. There's always one more. So this was labeled as going to the forward point. This is the forward point. There we go. Okay, it's good. Coming up next, fuel tank install. How do you like those apples?